What's going on, everybody? Today I just want to break down this news post about the class and rarity gates coming to Chapter 2 of Act 6. We actually get quite a bit of info about the gating system, not just overall, but also how exactly it's going to look within 6.2 itself. So there's a lot to talk about here. As for the rest of 6.2, well, we're still missing a lot of info. We don't have any info about the rewards. We don't know if there's going to be a new title. We don't know if there's going to be any new nodes and how those are going to look yet. But I'm sure we're going to get that info very soon because Kabam does give us one other piece of info here saying that mid-June is when we could expect to see 6.2 live in-game. So I'm sure in the coming weeks leading up to the release of 6.2, just like Kabam does for any major release in this game, we're probably going to get some additional forum posts with all of that other additional information. As for the gating system itself, well, Kabam's philosophy behind it is that they want to put restrictions on individual paths versus the quests overall. So if we look at something like Variant 1, where each chapter you had restrictions to only use certain class types. So for Chapter 1, you could only use Mutant or Skill champions. And with this new system, if Kabam wanted to, they could say, okay, you could use any champion you want, but if you want to take this one path that's on, let's say, the outer right side or outer left side of the map, for those paths, you would only be able to use skill champions or mutant champions. So it's just a way to, not restrict the entire quest and just apply them to individual paths. When it comes to 6.2 overall, each quest is going to have 10 paths. There's going to be 6 quests, just like there are for any chapter for all of the other story content previously. So each quest has 10 paths. 4 of those paths are going to have class or rarity gates, and 6 of those paths have no gates at all. And this is a little bit deceiving. When I first saw no gates, I thought that meant we can bring our 4-star champions again. But no, Kabam clarifies later in this post that there is still the overall restriction of only being able to use 5 or 6-star champions. There's just no other restrictions for these 6 paths in all 6 of the quests. The second bullet point goes on to say here that all of the class gates in Chapter 2 will lead you down a path where you have class advantage. They are designed to be easier when you achieve the requirements, which is pretty interesting. It says it's going to be easier when you achieve the requirements, and I believe it. I mean, if you think about if you think about how you approach a quest now, just and looking at your own roster, I feel like a lot of us have kind of that one stronger class type, and it changes for everybody, right? But let's say you have a few strong cosmic champions or something like that. Or maybe a certain cosmic champion. That's your go-to champion. That's your default before you look at what other nodes feel like you just want to use that champion, right? Well, if you enter a quest and you have the option to go down a path that has no restrictions on it whatsoever and just has a whole bunch of random class types of champions, or you look at a quest or a path within the quest that has all tech champions, well, the path with all the tech champions is probably going to be easier if you're good with mystics, right? Or I'm sorry, good with cosmics. But then, of course, flip that if you have a certain class type that you're particularly weak in, where you don't have a very strong rank up, or maybe that rank up that you did choose, it was just a prestige one, like Thor Ragnarok in my case, well, that path might be pretty difficult. This last bullet point here is just talking about how it's going to look in-game with the different pictures. A little bit of a preview, including when you're in the actual quest itself, where you can tap on the gate and see what champions are actually required to get through it. As for the individual paths within 6.2 here, Kabam says at no time in 6.2 will there be any paths that require to pass through more than one of these gates, so the requirements will not stack. If we look, I want to look at Quest 1 and Quest 2 together because they're set up very similarly here, where you need 2 or more of a certain champion. I'm just going to refer to it as 2 of a kind from here on out because, in my head, I kind of imagine the 5 champions that we could bring in a quest as like holding 5 cards in our hand, and yeah, you need 2 of a kind in order to get through certain gates. So you need 2 of a kind when it comes to each of the 6 class types. Mutant, Cosmic, Tech, Skill, Science, Mystic, they're all just spread throughout the first and second quest. And just to clarify, when Kabam says 2 or more 5-star Mutant champions, they really mean 5-star, not 5 or 6-star. It's just 5-star. So that means if you are lucky enough to be the owner of a 6-star Domino, she does not count towards those requirements. You'd probably still want to use her anyway because that path is going to be filled with all skill champions and probably going to have a pretty good time if you have a 6-star Domino. But it can impact the rest of your team that you're bringing, and you might not be able to fit in as many synergy champions, or I don't know, maybe you want to bring a different champion for the final boss or something like that. So it is going to impact how we kind of assemble our teams for these different quests based on if you're using 5 or 6-star champions. There's also the restriction. One path per quest has restrictions for 6-star champions, where once again you need 2 of a kind here, 2 or more 6-star champions. Doesn't matter the class type in this case, but they do have to be 6 stars. As we move on to quest 3 and 4, it looks identical to the first 2 quests, except now you need 3 of a kind. You need 3 of the 5 stars of the different class types, or 3 of these 6-star champions for these paths here in the quest. And as you can imagine, as we get to quest 5 and 6, well, now you need 4 of a kind. It's getting pretty tight on the teams here. Kabam was kind enough to allow us to use 1 champion of our choosing, and then the rest of it is going to have to be filled in with just whoever we got. We got to make do. Especially, it's going to be especially difficult, I think, when it comes to the 6-star champions, just because they are very difficult to get still right now. They do go on in this post to say, they're more accessible than ever and will continue to become more accessible. And, while that's true, every day that goes by, everything in this game is just more accessible. It certainly hasn't hit that point yet where it feels like 6-star champions are very accessible. It feels like they are still very, very difficult to come by and take a long time to build up those 10,000 6-star shards. So, we'll have to see what actually happens in the future. We're due for an update to Alliance Wars Season 10. I think they've already said that there's going to be an update to the rewards there. We'll see how that looks. Over time, they update the arenas, they update everything in this game, and I'm sure we are going to get more 6-star shards in general. But for right now, these requirements are pretty steep. As for how I feel about this in general, well, I like to look at this from 2 different angles. I want to separate the ideas of, okay, is this content fun? Is it going to be just a good time going through the content? Or is it not going to be fun? Is there something that we think Kabam could do to make things more interesting? And I also want to separate the idea of like fear of not having the champions to get through here, not being able to keep up because you've gotten bad luck out of the crystals, which I think is what a lot of people feel when they see something like this. Maybe it's not fear as in like like a scary movie, someone's coming to get you type of fear, but just that response of, well, I'm screwed unless I spend a whole bunch more money or a whole bunch more time. Kabam is squeezing me out. I've heard from a ton of people, free to play is dead, and all these different things. If you haven't spent a bunch on Cavalier crystals, this content's not for you type of thing. So I want to look at it from both of those perspectives. And I'll start with the kind of for fun perspective of, is this the best content that Kabam can come up with? And I think that there's, maybe ways that Kabam can make this more interesting. It's kind of tough to come up with. Like we tried thinking about it during the live stream last night, and we thought of some ideas, some concepts that may work, but it's actually pretty difficult. The best way really is to continue discussing it during the live stream, I feel. Because someone might think they have a really good idea. I thought I had a really good idea of how Kabam can make things better, but honestly, the response I was getting during the live stream was nobody really seemed too excited about it. My idea, which was essentially kind of add another difficulty option, not like the monthly event quest where you have a normal, heroic, and uncollected, and you have to spend your energy again and again and again to get the rewards, but instead, just choose before you enter the quest, like, okay, do you want to go in normal mode and fight the enemies, They have, the same amount of attack and health and all that, but they don't have as steep of restrictions. Or do you want to take on this additional challenge where it's the same enemies, but now you do have these restrictions? You only have to go through the quest one time, whether you choose, like the normal mode or the challenge mode. But if you complete the challenge mode, then you get some type of cosmetic reward, like a profile picture, or that can be a new way to get a Legends badge or a different title or something like that. But it wouldn't create a larger gap in the player base. So it would be more of a way to kind of help out that idea of, well, I'm screwed because I haven't pulled the right champions, but I don't want to be excluded from this content. Just kind of a way to solve that. But yeah, to be honest, I didn't get a great response on a live stream about that. Some people were said that's an okay idea, others maybe not so much. Some of the other ideas we came up with, there was a couple of interesting things. I'm not going to call anything out in this video in particular because we could talk about that for hours, just ways to design content in general. Again, something like that really is better to be discussed during a live stream because you might think you have a great idea, but sometimes it can be pretty easy to find holes in that idea. And sometimes people do really have great ideas and we can't find anything wrong with them. And then, yeah, we can give that feedback to Kabam, and maybe that's how we can help shape the game going forward. So the other way that I want to look at this, though, is that idea of, am I screwed? Just in the general sense, not me in particular, but players saying, am I screwed because I have not gotten lucky with these crystals? And I've heard this from all levels of players. People in my own alliance that have a fair number of 6 stars. We're talking like 15, 26 stars. Some of them have gotten quite unlucky, have like Sig 40, Karnax, and stuff like that make up a good chunk of the 6 stars they've pulled. Haven't gotten too many good champions. Multi-duped Jane Fosters and such. So even in my own alliance, but I'm sure all the way down to the players who, are not even in Act 6 yet. Maybe they're just starting to clear Act 5 and they're looking ahead to the future and thinking, oh, I'm screwed here. Why even bother, right? So I want to look at a wide range of players, and what I want to do is I want to simulate the experience of going through this quest and just see how far everyone can get before they get stuck. Because I think everyone starts out the same way when approaching new content like this. We get this new chapter, and there's of course rewards for doing a single clear of the chapter. So I think everybody tries to find that, path of least resistance, going through one path of each of the 6 quests to get that initial completion rewards. For the most part, that's how everybody approaches content. Okay, there might be some special snowflakes out there that go through the quest one at a time or something like that. Hey, I do that sometimes myself. But in general, we go through one path to get that initial completion rewards, and then we'll go back, and that's where everybody kind of does their own thing. Some people do try to focus on just one quest at a time at that point. Some people will try to focus on the 6 paths per quest that have no gates. So there's still 36 quests that you can tackle before you even hit restrictions. And then some people will say, okay, well, I have a strong set of cosmic champions, so I'm going to knock out not only the cosmic path in quest 1, but the cosmic quest in all of these chapters, because that's going to be even easier than taking the no gated paths, because it's going to be a lineup of tech champions, and it's going to be a pretty easy time depending on which cosmic champions you actually have. And I feel like everyone is going to get to a different point in the quest before they get stuck. Some players who have very strong rosters and have a lot of 6-star champions, well, even this is not going to hold them back. But, eventually the majority of players going through the quest they're going to get stuck. I think, honestly, before hitting the actual restrictions, I think a lot of players are going to get stuck just because the content's going to be difficult. Enemies are going to have a high amount of health, a high amount of attack. There might be other nodes in there that are difficult to overcome. Some of the champions that have been released lately are just difficult to fight in general, like, Havoc or Korg or Thing. And I feel like people are going to get stuck on those fights before they ever hit the restrictions. I feel like the people who do get through all of the no gated paths, though, now they've completed at least 36 out of the 60 paths in 6.2. Um, you know, Quest 1 and 2 might be a good place to start looking at, where you only need two of a kind for each of the paths, for each of these 8 paths. And that doesn't feel super restrictive to me personally. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but even if you have the worst 6-star champions possible, if you throw X-Pool Dead Force and Hulkbuster on your team, those are your two 6-stars. I still feel like you can fill out the rest of your team with the normal champions, the normal 5-stars that you use all the time. And it might make things a little bit more difficult, but it's probably not going to be that bad. How many enemies are actually on these paths? I don't know. I would have to guess somewhere in the range of like 7 for the earlier quests. I actually counted for the later quests in 6.1.6, the final quest of 6.1. I just picked a couple of random paths, and there were 9 in total, including the final boss. So 8 on a path, 9 once you include the boss. So there's not that many enemies per path, but if we just go back to this first and second quest here, I feel like if you can actually make it through those first 36 paths, then you're not going to have too much issue getting through these next 8, and that bumps everybody up to about 44 out of the 60 paths in total before facing any real restrictions. I think from there, players will kind of slow down as they finish up the rest of these quests, kind of picking out different paths that maybe they have some stronger champions for, leaving the ones that may be a little bit more difficult. Probably leaving the ones for the 6-star restrictions for last if you don't have very strong 6-star champions. But the bottom line is the majority of 6.2 doesn't really have restrictions in my eyes. Like I said, 36 have no gates at all, and then these 8 feel like nothing when it comes to restrictions. So 44 out of the 60 paths, and then just kind of slowly making your way through these quests. I don't know. It's going to be challenging for sure. It's going to slow players down for sure, but I also don't think there's any real rush to get through the content. If it's difficult and it's going to slow players down, if it's going to slow you down, then think about everyone around you. Everyone around you is facing the same challenges. Is it only you that doesn't have a good 6-star roster, or is there the majority of the player base that doesn't have a strong 6-star roster? Everyone is going to be taking their time. You're not suddenly going to be able to, it's not suddenly going to fall behind and no longer be able to maintain a spot in your alliance or anything like that. The rewards for 6.2, I'm sure they're going to be good, but I'm also sure that it's going to be the type of rewards where if you don't get them right away, you will be absolutely fine, and it'll be content that you can look forward to and just kind of take your time with. For everyone else that is going to try to push through and try to get that 100% completion, I think just looking at things path by path and breaking it down that way makes it feel a whole lot less daunting. Even if we just jump to the most difficult paths, this path is probably going to be the most difficult, right? The final quest need 4 or more 6-star champions. Unless you have good 6-stars and you've been rank 2ing your 6-stars or something like that, this path is probably going to be very difficult. But at the same time, it's not going to be the most difficult things that players have gone through in the past. If you think back to Labyrinth of Legends, before players were able to rank 5 their 5-star champions, people were going through with rank 4s. And the rest of their team was filled up with attack synergy champions, basically useless, where at least these 6-stars, even if they don't have the best ones, maybe you could use them for a fight or half of a fight. And if there's only 9 fights in total in there, well, they're not going to be totally useless, even the trash 6-stars. I don't think it's even going to compare to what players were doing with the less optimal champions going through Labyrinth of Legends. Because before Kabam started adding all these powerful champions like Blade and Stark Spidey and stuff like that were very effective in Labyrinth of Legends, it was basically Star-Lord or bust. And people still said, you know what, screw it, I'm going in with Storm. I'm going in with Electra, going in with whatever champion they had, and they were still able to get the job done. Maybe it was a little bit slower. Maybe I had to spend some extra time building up resources, but players got it done. I think a lot of this game is kind of like a mental battle when taking on new challenges like this. I mean, how many times have all of us said at one point or another, "Oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought." Like going through Realm of Legends, or it's tough at first. It seemed impossible, but eventually you get through, and it's like, oh, actually, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Or maybe taking on a new piece of story content, or maybe you're changing alliances and you're moving up a tier in Alliance War, and you're thinking like this is going to be a night like everyone's going to think I suck, I'm not going to be able to handle it, and a lot of times it's actually this is fine, or you get used to it pretty quick. Same thing for Labyrinth of Legends, same thing for becoming uncollected, and I think it's going to be the same thing when it comes to 6.2. You could choose to, you know, do what it takes to get through there right away, saving those extra resources, or you could choose to wait. And I don't think there's anything wrong with waiting on it and waiting until you have the champions to make it easier. But the biggest thing to do is to think about this quest one path at a time. Don't think about the entire quest, because if you do that, it's going to get very overwhelming. Um, but yeah, just break it down one path at a time. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. And that's more of just covering like the fear side of things, because I mean, I've heard from a lot of people that free to play is dead, and all these other things that people are very worried about. Uh, as far as going back to the other part of the discussion of, is this the most fun type of thing that Kabam can come up with? I think when it comes to that, there's a lot more to discuss there. I think there's, it's if you don't like this content, that's perfectly reasonable to feel that way. Not everybody's gonna like everything. Give Kabam that feedback. Let's discuss it during the live stream. See if we can come up with a better system for the future, and then we can collectively give Kabam that feedback. Because I'm not totally sold on this being the absolute best way to design content going forward either. I am going to be a little bit patient and wait and see how it actually is, but we already spent the majority of last night discussing what we think could be a more fun system than what Kabam has in place, and yeah, I feel like we were just at the tip of the iceberg for that conversation. So you're more than welcome to join in. Doesn't matter what opinion you have. If you like this, if you don't like it, if you think this is the absolute worst thing Kabam's ever done, you're welcome to share all that stuff. You're not going to get censored during the live stream. The only thing that I ask is to keep the conversation civil. Don't get pissed off at me or somebody else or whoever if they don't agree with what you think. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.